Ladies and gentlemen and friends, John Roisland here, bringing you House of Tortured Souls live. John is presenting to you his own show, The Witching Hour. Special guest tonight, we have Mr. Dave Neabore with us.
Dave, hey, how are you?
Oh, man, thanks you for taking the time. I appreciate it. Dave is bass player extraordinaire for the one and only Dog Eat Dog. Now, for those, Dave, who may not be familiar with the band, who luckily I got to see, unfortunately, this is before you were with the band. I saw them play at Dobbs in South Street, Philly. It was a matinee show with, who was it? With Madball and
Downset.
And Downset, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, my God.
Just so you know, just to clarify, I started the band, and I've played every show with the band. So if you saw Dog Eat Dog, you saw Dog Eat Dave.
You were, oh my God, my deepest, I apologize completely. I did not think you were
problem.
There.
I was there. I remember it very well. Absolutely.
That was a phenomenal show. It was one of my few and actual only true official hardcore matinee shows, and blew the roof off the place. Phenomenal show.
It was a fun tour. We had a really good time with Madball and Downset. We had already toured with, so like we knew those guys. We had done 2 tours of Europe with them before we did that tour. So we spent a lot of time with Downset and Madball. We became like really close with and good friends with on that tour, and still getting love today. So that started a 25-year friendship. So that tour was special for everybody. I'm glad you were there. It was definitely cool.
Oh man, I mean those 3 bands, on the same bill was at that given time outside of the heavy metal scene, waiting for the next Slayer album and so forth, and Biohazard to come around. That bill that you guys put together for that show was the be all end all for us. It really was. We crammed, I don't know, I think 5 or 6 of us into my buddy Chevy. We drove up from Annapolis, Maryland, and just walked up and down South Street, got the cheesesteak, had a couple beers at a place right across the street from the place, and just made a day of it. Man, show.
I remember it was definitely packed. There's no doubt. It was a packed one. That was cool. It was like, I remember like, I didn't really know Philly that well at that time. I'd been there, but it was definitely like a great vibe. I remember walking up and down South Street and being like, this is a cool area here. Now I've gone there a lot since then, and I got a better idea of Philly. But back then I was a younger guy, and it was every day was an adventure when you're touring. It's great.
Now, can you give the listeners here a brief description, or it's hard to categorize you guys. Now, we're sitting here talking about how you guys are on a hardcore bill.
Yeah.
Dog Eat Dog definitely brings its own style to the world.
Well, we started 30 years ago in 1990, and at our earliest roots, I would say that we were part of like the New York, New Jersey hardcore scene.
Okay.
We signed with Roadrunner Records, which was primarily a metal label.
Right.
And they weren't used to, we kind of incorporated some rap elements. A lot of bands weren't doing that, but certain bands were, like Biohazard, who were like our very close friends at the time. And that we were kind of on the same level with them, where it was delivering a little more rap approach as opposed to just like singing or screaming. And we had a pretty successful first LP, Allboro Kings, and that kind of put us on MTV. And then we got kind of not a lot of pressure, but some pressure from the label to kind of write more commercial songs, because we were doing very well in Europe.
Sure.
So we kind of changed in the mid 90s, like around 96, to like incorporate more like pop punk. And we had like more saxophone. So it was like horns and melodic vocals now on top of like punk and hardcore. And then we on our further records down, we incorporated reggae and other kinds of elements. So like, it's really like Dog Eat Dog is just a mix of everything, but it's got like punk, and hardcore roots to it all. It's just, over the years, 30 years, you change a bit and try a bunch of different things. So I really suggest, to somebody, our album Walk With Me is the hardest album to listen to. It came out in 2005, but I think that's a great overall representation of the band, because the album sounds good, and it has like all our styles on there. So if you can, on YouTube, you can definitely hear the album Walk With Me 2005. It's probably our least known record, but I think it's the best.
Okay, well, so then that answers that question. I was gonna ask what your proudest album would be. So you heard it straight from the horse's mouth. You guys definitely check that out. It's just such a fun music, and I watch you guys religiously. All of you're very avid on social media with Instagram and keeping everybody updated, and your live shows, especially in Europe. Oh my God, they just look like you guys are just having a blast.
Yeah, I mean, it really is fun, and the audiences in Europe are just crazy. And we play some pretty big festivals. We played Wacken open air. We've played Sonosphere, and we've done countless festivals, big ones, Brutal Assault in Czech. Even though we're not metal, we just keep ending up on these metal festivals, which is great, because I'm a metalhead. I grew up with metal. I'm seeing and hanging out with some of my favorite bands of all time, and it's a great thing. But the good thing about Dog Eat Dog is we can kind of switch and play a pop festival and still make it work, so
Right.
But keeping fun is the key word to everything, and our shows are definitely fun, and it's not only fun for the audience, it's fun for the guys in the band. We actually enjoy being together, and however tough it is on the road, when you have good friends with you and you're not fighting over bullshit or whatever, this is what it's all about, and I think that's why we've lasted 30 years and still going.
Well, it definitely shows. I don't see one picture or video of you guys live when it just doesn't look like you guys aren't genuinely loving what you are doing. You're up there partying, you're with your friends, your brothers, so to speak, and just having a great time at it.
That's
all
it.
Smile.
That's why we started the band. I mean, we certainly didn't think it was ever going to last this long, or that we were going to get to the level of success that we had. You got to just love doing it, and just I don't smile for the camera. I'm just smiling because I really love playing this music and watching people having a good time, and it's like it just never gets old for me.
Well, you mentioned you never thought it would last this long. What would your fallback job have been, or career, if something different? What would it have been, do you think?
Well, that's a good question, because I didn't go to college. My college was touring Europe with Mucky Pup, the band I was in before Dog Eat Dog.
Sure, I remember them well.
I was playing in bands since I was 12 years old, and different like shows and some local club gigs, but it was never my intention by the time I got to be a senior in high school that I was going to have a career in music. That wasn't even a question. I was like, well, shit, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to like a local like college and sort out my life, because I really didn't like pay a lot of attention in high school. I was definitely that guy skating through high school and just charming his teachers and not really doing much, listening to a lot of music, chasing girls or whatever. I mean, I just didn't really have a plan. And then I got a call like end of the school year, senior year of high school, from Mucky Pup, and they're like, we were looking for a bass player, and I got the job, and it was like, we're making a record and we're going on tour. And I'm like, I went to college and then dropped out because we were going to Europe, and there was just no way I was going to be able to like do my classes from Europe or anything. So I thought, okay, when Mucky Pup ends, I'll go back to college, I'll get some degree in something, I'll get a job. Well, Mucky Pup turned into Dog Eat Dog, and we never stopped touring and never stopped making records. And here I am 30 years later.
And here you are today.
And 32 years with Mucky Pup touring. That's what I know. I know how to travel around the world. I know how to entertain people. And it's what I've done. Now, if I all of a sudden that stopped, which I know it will, I guess making music for movies or television, some type of soundtrack field. I know it's not a big paying job, because it's generally the last thing people need on a movie or show. So the money's always gone, but it's my passion. So I would probably get into some kind of production, music production of some type.
That's awesome to hear, and I'll probably be knocking on your door, God willing. I ever actually finish writing my script for the short holiday horror film that I'm working on myself.
That's awesome.
But with that being said, you are a avid horror fan.
Oh yeah.
You are an avid soundtrack fan.
Definitely.
And here is the clincher right here that I think is just the coolest thing amongst everything. You are putting all that together. You are a avid vinyl collector.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that is just the neatest damn thing in the world. I was thinking about our conversation, and my youngest son, he is gotten big into vinyl. He's a retro listener. He's big into Queen and David Bowie and so forth. And so for his last year's birthday, he lives in Delaware, and I drove him into Baltimore, into the Inner Harbor and Fells Point, and took him to one of the few record stores that I could find in the area. And I figured, it had been a long time since I bought vinyl. In most places, it used to always be you could find some that was used. And maybe you'd pay $5 for a double live album. And I'm walking through, and my son's picking up this and picking up that, and they're all brand new. Everything's being re-released now on vinyl, and $30-$40 a pop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. I mean, my mind was blown. I was completely taken back by this. And, within 5 minutes, he's already got a shopping cart full. But you are collecting this stuff. I'm watching you. You're collecting this stuff from all across the world, it seems.
Right. Well, see, I got into soundtracks, now, of course, there's going to be people who are older than me that, had more experience. But basically, I started listening to soundtracks around like 1981, 82.
Okay.
So pretty early for a 12-year-old kid to be listening to like Varis Sarabon vinyl soundtracks, but
the appreciation that you had for it, especially at that age, that's incredible.
Yeah, I was so like fascinated with horror films, and the music on some of them, really stood out, especially Halloween and Halloween 2. Those were absolutely key soundtracks for me. Like when I heard Halloween 2, it just changed my life, and it still to this day affects things. Escape from New York was another one that really affected me. Like when I saw that movie, that music made that movie. And the sounds of those synthesizers were so heavy to me at the time. I was like, this shit is crazy. And still in my work today, everything, it's still affected by John Carpenter's sound. So him especially. And in the mid 80s, I made a friend who worked at a video store, mom and pop, the old shop.
Oh yeah. Sure.
And he was a soundtrack guy. And you didn't know anybody who was listening to these horror soundtracks, but he did, and he had them. And he recorded me Maniac soundtrack.
Wow.
On one side of a tape, and then he gave me North by Northwest by Bernard Herrmann, and he was only vinyl, all vinyl, and he had these records, and he made me I remember one Japanese movie no one knows, but it's awesome, called The Village of Eight Gravestones. It's on a Varis vinyl record. Anyway, I used to just listen to these tapes, and then when Fangoria came out, they used to run ads in the back where you could like order by mail.
Sure.
These records, so they would have like Escape from New York, they would have the John Carpenter ones, they would have a couple other ones, but they definitely had Dawn of the Dead, and that was the first one I ever mail ordered. And I got my Dawn of the Dead original vinyl, and everything was changed for me after that. Like then I was like, okay, we used to have a store in Manhattan called Footlight Records, and there was also Tower Records back in the day, which had like a huge, everything was on vinyl. So that's the thing, is CDs weren't even out yet. So all you
Right.
had was vinyl or cassette. And so like when you go to the soundtrack collection, I'll never forget going to Tower Records, uptown downstairs. And it was like thousands of soundtracks on vinyl, and the ones that people are paying top dollar for today, they were all there in a bunch of them. And so I used to like have my parents like drive me in, and then I'd pick one soundtrack every time I'd go in. I can remember coming home with Creep Show.
Oh,
Man,
wow.
so many. That one changed my life too. I mean, there were so many that that I wish that I had bought, knowing how they would go. But I always collected them on vinyl. And then when CDs came out, I switched over. So I can remember getting The Fog and Escape from New York, early Halloween 2, like on CD early, like we're talking like mid 80s. Yeah. So, and it never stopped.
Well, studies have said over the years, and I remember being in school when the CDs first came out, and I was in science class, and our teacher was talking to us about it, and this is like the only time I ever listened to this old bat, because she was just a stick in the mud, real pain in the ass of a woman. But she had said that scientific studies have proven that comparatively, compact disc to vinyl is actually still a better sound. Yes, you get all the little, the little, I don't even know the
cracks and pops.
Exactly. Yeah. But the actual sound recording is actually better quality than on a compact disc. Do you prefer, if you were to walk into one store and they were to tell you every single thing that you find on CD, we guarantee we have it in vinyl?
I'd buy both.
You buy both.
Yeah.
Right.
I have everything on. I have the vinyl and the CD, because I do a lot of driving around, and I only listen to soundtrack music in my car, and I want them on CD for the car. I don't do a huge amount of record listening. I do listen to everything I get, but it's not like I spend much more time in my car. So I get the vinyl. I like at night listening to vinyl. When you're nice and relaxed, it's cool. I love it. But you're cleaning your house, I love having vinyl on. But definitely CDs important for me for the car. But just to jump ahead on what we were talking, nowadays vinyl, especially the horror vinyl, is really hot. The original stuff, the stuff from the 80s. Everyone is paying $100 for a John Carpenter original. Sure. And all the companies that are doing the like reissues are doing such an incredible job. I mean, they're just beautiful, but they're expensive. I mean, you're talking $30-$40. You're getting your money's worth in terms of packaging and the quality of the music. So here I am buying them again. So like there's stuff I've got like two different vinyls, 2 or 3 different CDs. I think I have 6 or 7 versions of Creep Show at this point. Like it's one of my favorites. So I continue to buy it. But I think you're getting a lot of younger people who are really getting into horror soundtracks now in the last like 5 years. I think, I'm trying to pinpoint it, but there's certain movies that came out that started this like synth wave, and a lot of that started with like the Tron soundtrack by Daft Punk and the It Follows soundtrack. And there were a couple other ones that were, kind of really well done, retro.
So,
and I think that sparked a big interest in a lot of the John Carpenter and a lot of the horror soundtracks.
All right. So you first started buying vinyl. You said, you'd have mom and dad take you into the city, and you started, and at that age you were roughly what, 12, you said?
I would say my beginnings were, basically between 12 and 15 when I started.
Okay, so at that time frame, you might not have the mentality of being, let's say, a collector. You bought it. Ooh, I got the new album. It's great. I'm going to listen.
Yeah.
And then over the course of years, it might sit in the corner of the room, get thrown away, what have you. How much, I mean, I know nowadays you collect. I don't even know if you know how much vinyl you honestly have in numbers, but how much do you think, oh my God, I used to have that vinyl back when I was a kid, and God only knows what happened to it kind of day?
Well, that's a problem for me, and not because I didn't know where they were, but because I sold a lot of it.
Right.
And in about 2001, after 9/11, believe it or not, the music industry took a big hit. Bands weren't touring. Everything shut down. It was kind of like it is now.
Right.
I'm not touring. I should have been in Europe. I'm supposed to be making a record and touring right now, but everything's canceled for the summer. Well, after 9/11, everything went on a shutdown. And I had to continue to earn money. So I was like, you know what? I have all this horror stuff and I got it on CD. So why do I need the vinyl?
Sure.
And I made a big mistake. I sold nearly all my death metal and metal vinyl, and I got a lot for those. I did well, but I regret them every day. Like I'm like, where's my Slayer Rain and Blood vinyl? And it's like, oh yeah, you sold that 20 years ago. Damn, I can't remember. So I kept a log of everything, but I'm afraid to look at it because I know it. So mostly metal, hardcore, and punk records. I sold half my collection. Unfortunately,
Wow.
I shouldn't have. In terms of soundtracks, I sold too many, but less than that. I probably only sold about 50 vinyls, but
Hmm.
ones that if I were to buy back, I'd pay, 4 times as much as I got back
I'm
then.
sure.
Nobody wanted vinyl in 2001, 2002, even 2003. Nobody cared about soundtracks on vinyl. You were maybe getting $10 for like the original Troll soundtrack. I think I got $8 for it. Now they're going for like $60 to $90 for that one with the troll on the cover, the original
Jeez. Wow.
um, version. Yeah. And it's like, well, you can't look into the future, and I had it on CD, so I was like, well, I don't need this vinyl. I wasn't thinking like it's going to be worth anything. There's no way I could have known that these records were going to go up in value. It was like Repo Man soundtrack, one of my favorite movies. I'm like,
Right.
I got it on CD, twice on CD. Why do I need the vinyl? I sold it for like $6. I bought it back for 30
Right.
recently. I was like,
Yeah.
one by one, I'm going to buy these things back when I find them at a good price. But yeah, I regret. So my advice to anyone, if you have anything that you hold valuable, it's better not to sell it.
Right.
I mean, if you can really live without it, good, but you're probably going to regret it someday, especially these things change in value and just sentimental value. You
Sure.
can't replace that.
Well, going back to when you were a kid, first getting into music, and like I've been explaining to our listeners here, Dog Eat Dog has definitely got its own wide style. What was your influence as a bass player, as a musician? Who influenced you? Did you want to grow up and be, the next Tom Araya, or were you looking to, bring something else to the table? 'Cause, I know you grew up as well as I did listening to, the heavy metal, the hardcore, and who inspired you getting started?
Well, that's a good question. Kiss is definitely the first band that made me really excited about music, for sure. I
Sure.
saw and heard Kiss, and everything in my life was about Kiss. Like I just was obsessed with them. So this is the late 70s. And as I grew more like aware of music around like 79, 80, like that's when I started hearing and seeing like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Rush, Black Sabbath, those were the bands, AC/DC. Those were the bands I all started like hearing around like 80. And that's when I started collecting a lot of records. And I really like, before 80, it was more like Kiss and that was it.
Yeah.
But, I can say like my like Geddy Lee from Rush, like just blew my mind with like, I really understood what bass playing was because of that.
Yeah.
Where it was just like, even Sabbath too, like that's a bass doing that part, like I was getting that. And I wasn't like planning on being a bass player, but I grew up next to two brothers. One played drums, one played guitar.
Huh.
And I was hanging out with them anyway. And they're like, hey, if you get a bass, we could like start jamming some songs.
Right.
And so I got a bass. My mom found one for me somewhere, brought it home. And the first song we played was Aces High by Iron Maiden.
Oh, man,
So
nice.
Steve Harris would be, I'd say, like my number two
Sure.
influence, like watching him play and listening to old Maiden records and just hearing the bass. It was really loud in the mix. It was like part of, a whole nother level of what was going on. And those were bass players that brought bass to my attention. And so really like standard, basic, great heavy metal was like the foundation of, but up until like I heard Metallica, and then heard Megadeth and heard Anthrax and started hearing SOD, and like you're talking like mid 80s. That's when I said goodbye to like conventional heavy metal. I was like, no, I need this new stuff. Slayer.
Oh,
I
yeah.
need the heavier stuff. So really around 85 is when my whole life just switched gears into like appreciating punk and hardcore, and like starting to go to shows, and like that was it. So those are all influences. But the amazing thing is at the same time I was seeing classical concerts at Lincoln Center and appreciating them because I truly loved what I was hearing. And my grandfather, who lived around the corner, was, constantly seeing classical shows and bringing me to them. So I had this like, when I heard like Yngwie Malmsteen, Rising Force, it was like exactly the record of what was going on in my mind at the time. It was like perfect cross of metal and classical. And that is really what brought me, like when I heard Goblin, and I heard Claudio Simonetti doing like Demons, where you heard a little like fugue style keyboard in that horror music. I'm like, this is just like absolutely perfect. This is exactly what I love, So like my musical trail, it's all over the place, but it seems to make sense when classical and heavy music combined.
Oh, that's awesome. You definitely have a wide appreciation for music itself as a whole, and I respect that. I really do.
I'm pretty open, man. I rarely criticize anything. I can look for the good in almost anything. I mean, I just don't feel like being negative towards music is helping anybody. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't like it, turn it on something else, right? We
Well,
all have the whole world of music to choose from. So, instead of saying how bad something is, just find something that's good.
well, with that being said, who is your? I don't want to limit it to who is your favorite musical act, because the genre is so wide. But let's just say, who is your go-to music? You don't know
Yeah,
what
I
to
mean,
listen to? I'm always going to put this CD in.
well, that's tough because I almost only at this point listen to soundtrack music. That's, no, it's not a band. I mean, if I had to choose an artist, I could, but let's say soundtracks don't exist and I'm just talking about the regular world of music. I mean, it's hard to choose. I love stuff like Bad Religion. I can listen to them. They make me feel positive. I love still listening to classic music like Bad Brains. I never get tired of listening to Bad Brains. I mean, the list just goes on and on. If I'm in the mood for Slayer, it's perfect for that time, So picking one artist is so difficult. Goblin, like one of my all-time favorite, but they're still, I guess, more soundtrack band. I don't know if you know Vangelis. He's a
Hmm.
kind of a new agey type artist, but I have every single album and just incredible. But that probably one of my all-time favorite artists. I don't know. Who would you pick?
Oh, wow. As far as bands go, I have. Uh, my father raised me, listening to Crosby, Stills and Nash and Hart and Bob Seger and so forth. So, anytime I hear something like that, the nostalgia of being with my father as a kid
Yeah,
always kind of hits me.
right.
Um,
Yeah.
Going through my long hair and my headbanging and my hardcore stage, I was always still a Prince fan, always. But yet, my Honestly, my go-to band is Typo Negative.
Okay.
There's just something
Respect to that.
about their music. It wasn't stage diving. It wasn't elbows and knuckles. It wasn't even funny. They're called the Drab Four. I still didn't find them to be dreary and doom. They just had a sound to them that just carried me.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, have you ever heard Carnivore before?
Oh, of course, love them.
Yeah. So we knew already Carnivore were pretty, that first record had some really doomy, great stuff on it. The second one was a little more up tempo, heavier. But I was a fan at that point, and so like I kind of remember when they were becoming Typo. They were a band called Repulsion for a short while.
Yep.
And then so I remember hearing the Repulsion demo and being like, okay, I hear the new way it is. And then we were signed to the same label as them, Roadrunner. So like I had advanced copies of Bloody Kisses before it even came out. And I was like, this is maybe the greatest record I've ever heard. Like at the time, like I just was playing it nonstop. I was like, this is the perfect record.
That was a 24/7 album for me. It really was when that came out.
It is. It's still a great record. It's my favorite of their records. And I'm proud to say that, we played a lot of shows with them and festivals in Europe, and got to know the guys, and they were all great guys, and, just a cool band. I got to say, I have their records after. I never felt the same as I did with Bloody Kisses. Like I always felt like the next records, although people argue with me and say, no way, October Rust is better. And, that's, hey, whatever you like, it's fine with me.
Yep, I just, it's your own, yeah.
In the mid 90s, that was the record that just fucking blew doors off and connected.
Sure. Yeah. Well, speaking of you being on tour, has there ever been a band that you played with, opened for, were on the road with, that you actually fanboyed? You were like, holy shit, are you serious? We're really going to be playing for these guys?
Definitely. Mostly at festivals where we would be like playing with like a band that I love. And I was like, oh my God, but I'd have to think off the top of my head. I mean, we've played with so many bands. I mean, I've been backstage and looking, I can remember in Sonosphere, Anthrax, Iron Maiden, and I look to my left and those girls from Babymetal are there. And I was like, I have to get a picture with Babymetal. I absolutely have to. All these other guys I'll see again, but I don't know if I'll ever see Babymetal in their full uniform. So I got them. But I'm just such a huge fan of music that the most amazing thing is I can think of myself as a 15-year-old putting records on the turntable, and all of those bands that I loved, I've shared the stage with at this point in my life. And it's just like hard to believe that like at one point Agnostic Front were just like the band making me trash my room. And now I'm like friends with the guys, sick of it all. I mean, there's just so many bands, Cro-Mags. I mean, all the bands, our first tour ever for Dog Eat Dog was opening for the Bad Brains. It's like, you're talking about the band I just said is one of my absolute favorites. And now we're going to tour with them at our first tour, so like, I feel so proud of and humbled by the fact that I've been given that opportunity to turn my love of music into like something where I actually am like part of what I was listening to back then, and it's mind blowing how it happened, but it did, and it's a lot of hard work, and it's a lot of endurance and sticking with it even when times go bad, which they do, but everything changes, and if you can stick it out, good times come back. And for us, that certainly happened. We're on a second wave now that we're doing really, really well. So, and it's just nice to see all these bands that I mentioned, Suicidal, I'm still doing well. Ice-T and Body Count still like killing it, I mean, And you're seeing a lot of these bands, and what I'm seeing in Europe is the appreciation for especially the 90s bands right now is like at an all-time high. People are like, 90s were great. We want to see more of these bands, so that's a good thing for us.
Oh, no, that is awesome. There was it seemed like this year alone was the touring year, and unfortunately, obviously, with the coronavirus having ceased and postponed and canceled a lot of shows. But no, there have been bands coming out of the woodwork, a lot of retirement tours, a lot of reunion tours, and so forth. But now the music industry is definitely thriving. So let me ask you a quick question. Favorite horror movie?
Well, this one I get all the time. I know Halloween is and will always be my favorite horror movie. What it represents, the feeling you get every time you put Halloween in, it's just what I love about horror movies. It's got a tangible feel. It's got almost a smell to it too. I mean, it's just like you're in there, and it's like, if I ever want to feel the reason I love horror, Halloween is it for me. So that is number one. The Shining is number two because of the same thing. It's like one of those movies that just continues to scare me and be creepy and be great every single time I watch it, never get tired. So Halloween and The Shining, those are the two that really knocked me when I was young, and I still feel it today.
Then how do you compare Rob Zombie's Halloween with the original?
I went and saw it in the theater. I support Rob Zombie, but I do not like his Halloween movies. I'll watch them, but they don't even come close to Halloween 1 or 2.
So let me ask, is it because so many people are, it's a remake, I'm going to hate it. Even if it's a re-envisioning, I'm going to hate it automatically. I don't want to say people are closed-minded, maybe they don't give it the chance. If there was never a John Carpenter's Halloween, would you still feel the same about Rob Zombie's version?
I would say I own it. I own it on DVD. I own it on Blu-ray. I was there opening night. So like, even if I sound critical, I'm not. I support Rob Zombie. I just call it like I see it. And
I do appreciate that. A lot of people, like I said, I hate it because it's not John Carpenter.
No.
Right.
I'm a huge collector, as you know. I watch everything,
right.
and I like what I like, and I know that sometimes if you're in the wrong mood, a movie doesn't work. You watch it 2 years later, and you're like, oh, it's really good. So I'm really used to like. But you got to know, like every Halloween movie, I'm there opening night, like no matter what, and I'm giving it like I'm going in like expecting, a great time. And if I just feel entertained, like this last one that came out, the kind of reboot or whatever, I had a great time watching it. But it's not a great movie. I watched it again a second time, and I'm like, hey, it's going in my collection. I'm going to watch it once every couple of years and bring on more. I'm fine with it. It doesn't tarnish the original. Nothing will ever touch the first three. For me, those are, the ones that I just religiously watch year after year. I love all the movies, even the worst of them. Same with Friday the 13th. I got every Hellraiser. I got every Child's Play. I mean, I just love this shit. I love it. So, to start being critical of every movie, I told you, I like to point out the good stuff, but I can really see good in even the trashiest movies. And I just like to be entertained. So, as long as a movie is entertaining, then I'm good with it. The worst movies are the ones that provide no entertainment value.
Well, that kind of brings me to a sidestep. Let's put it that way. You've mentioned a good handful of iconic horror movies. Now, of course, there is a huge indie horror film and extreme gore that is coming out, or that has been out now, I should say, for a good couple years, and really tries to push a lot of limits. One that I actually just rewatched the other night. I had seen it about 3 times in broken up segments. Unfortunately, I kept getting interrupted. Never got never got to sit through the whole thing in its entirety, which I finally did the other night. I'm curious if you have, and if what your thoughts are on this style of movie. It's called A Serbian Film.
Well, I own a Serbian Film,
Mm-hmm.
multiple versions, and I got the T-shirt, so I guess that tells you
There
I'm a
you
fan
go.
of the movie. I think it's a really well-made movie. That's the
Yeah.
first thing. Is like it's not like some amateur just figuring out how to make a movie. I mean, this thing is well shot,
Yes.
it's well lit, it's
Yep.
well scored, and the plot is actually very simple. I mean, it's this, besides the character build up, what happens in the movie is like one bad night and then basically retracing your steps to figure out what the hell happened, and it
Right.
just gets worse. And I think the way it's made is actually it's a button pushing movie. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's absolutely extreme,
Mhm.
but it's really well done. And I gotta say, it's not something that I like want to watch every day. But I do say it's a movie that I would, you know, depending on the person, would recommend. If you're a horror fan and you've seen extreme gore and you understand it's not real, and you wanna be shocked, I think this is it's a classic shocker, and the world still needs movies that horror movies that push buttons the way the Video Nasties did. And I mean, every once in a while, like Necromantic came out and like everyone was shocked. Like you gotta have something
Right.
to be exciting. That's what makes horror great, is when you're like, have you seen this? I remember when Hot Tension came out, or High Tension,
Oh man,
and it was like, you
favorites.
know thank you, you just not only hit a home run in terms of like just like gore and like well shot and everything, but it like started like basically like a French horror, resurgence, and that
Yeah.
delivered a couple of other good ones like Inside and Martyrs. So
Martyr.
like,
Sure. Yep.
we had a
Oh,
nice
I
little
love
French run in the mid 2000s that was really good.
great
But
film.
again, Martyrs is to me, it's just as rough as Serbian Film.
In its own way. No, you're absolutely right. A lot of people had a hard time watching that movie, and at first I was like, okay, it's a great film, but no one's being raped, no one's being brutally murdered. Well, there are death scenes, obviously, um, but yeah, in its own way, there were people that, this is the most violent movie, this is the most disturbing movie. It's hard to watch and it's hard to get through, and like you said, to each their own. And that movie to me was just wow, be
Yeah,
all end all when I first saw it.
yeah. I mean, Serbian Film. Hey, like I said, I'm a fan. I'll be criticized for it, but it's just a movie, and it's a roughie, but it's still a movie. Nobody got hurt.
Hey, you got a T-shirt out of it, which I'm jealous of. So
Yeah, well, that was one of these. I go to horror conventions as much as possible, and there's sometimes people who are just making homemade, shirts, and those are the ones I like to support and grab because you don't see them
there you
everywhere.
go. Nope, I can appreciate that. That's exactly the thing. I'm not looking for a Freddy. I'm not looking for a Jason because I can find them at Walmart half the damn time. It's the Serbian Film. It's the Martyrs. It's
Yeah.
American Mary. Those are the T-shirts that I'm actually looking for. So yes, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, well, because of this corona, I've missed two conventions, so I'm bummed.
Yeah, you and me both.
Unfortunately,
You and
there's
me
no shopping now. We got to do all our online record buying and DVD and Blu-ray or whatever you're into, and it's not as much fun.
No, no, not nearly. I know a lot of friends of mine are vendors and cosplay actors, and they are missing out on a lot of their revenue. Comes
Yeah, yeah, it's
from
rough for everybody.
that it is. But hey, Dave, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate you taking the time. Um,
Hey,
and it's been a great time finally catching up and talking to you after knowing you for these couple of years. I
yeah,
want to congratulate you guys on all your found success, and I wish you guys all the best on the road.
hey, thank you, John. I really appreciate you inviting me on. And I appreciate you very much and what you do and supporting music and horror movies and things that are important to a lot of people. So I am glad that we could talk and maybe influence somebody to watch something they hadn't watched or listen to something they hadn't heard. That's all we can do.
Well, as soon as we announced, and House of Tortured Souls is doing a theme a month, trying to keep in tune with the Women in Horror month in February. We are doing the same with us. And April, we decided was our Music in Horror month, and I figured I know just avid collector who I want to be able to talk to about that.
Yeah. And just to say, we didn't even touch on it, but the soundtracks for the Ibon comic books.
Yes.
Which is Zombie and Bottom Feeder. Those are two that were released last year, 2019, that I did. So that really is the music and horror thing for me. Thank you for
reminding me.
And not only that, but I'm working on a new record that it's recorded, is not out yet, has to be mixed, but it's recorded, and that's a continuation of me recording my style of music, which is incorporating horror, and it's got beats to it, but it's mostly horror based, and it's 10 songs. It's going to be coming soon, but that's something to look forward to as soon as this world gets going again.
Well, definitely keep me tabs on that, because I'm definitely going to want to be checking that one out.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, hey, Dave, again, thank you. I'm gonna let you go. Let you wrap it up. Go
All right.
Stay safe.
All right. You too.
This is John with his Witching Hour here at House of Tortured Souls. Thanking Dave Neabore for having joined us here in our Music of Horror. Dave, until we talk again, stay safe, my friend.
You too. Thank you so much, John. Bye-bye. Bye.